I don't know, 25 years or more. We're property consultants, which is a sort of horrible generalization, but we specialize in acting for private clients and also corporate clients to some extent in the London property markets, mainly in the residential sector, but we also deal with commercial property. We are acquisition experts. I've lost count of how much property we've acquired for people over those years, but I can tell you we've made a lot of people an awful lot of fantastic returns. And that's really sort of one of the things we specialize in, as well as finding sort of lovely homes and pied-à-terres and stuff like that. But we do a fair amount of agency work. We do a lot of investment work, and we do an awful lot of property management work. Not necessarily properties for clients who we've actually bought the properties for, but we find more and more clients are looking for that really personal touch in prime London property management, where you're dealing with very substantial values often.
Well, I saw that in your PR piece that I was reading about in prep for this meeting, that Kensington and Chelsea are really prime. Of course, Westminster and Knightsbridge also, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everyone thinks of Kensington and Chelsea. Well, Knightsbridge actually is in Westminster, and it's sort of one of those sort of boundaries, where the rivers cross type of thing, and you're not quite sure where it is. But yeah, so we're prime central London. Say Kensington, Chelsea, which includes places like Notting Hill Gate, by the way.
I remember the movie by that title. I think it was with Hugh Grant and a bunch of good-looking women walking around.
It put Notting Hill even more on the map. All us locals knew it always was on the map, and then Notting Hill came out, and then they made one about Wimbledon, which I think they called SW19, which didn't quite have the big smash hit that the other day. I have to say, we know Wimbledon really well. We bought houses and stuff in Wimbledon.
So your people, your customers are high net worth individuals who are coming out of Australia or Greece or America or wherever.
Yeah, a lot of Americans actually. A lot of Americans, a lot of Middle East, really because of the dollar, the US dollar. It's been so favorable for such a long time since sort of Brexit. Even before Brexit, it was a bit soft, the pound, and it's been a fantastic buying opportunity. And you can imagine the spike in oil prices and the huge profits that have been made in various sectors feeds into London. And London is a great hub for all sorts of reasons. Despite Brexit, it's a great asset hub. It's wonderful for the Middle East. It's really great for the States. And we're finding increasingly more and more Americans, because we're also based in New York. We work out of New York, as you know. London is becoming more and more of a focal point. And one thing I'd just like to say, because people are wealthy, it doesn't mean that they're buying mansions and all the rest of it. Investment is often about studios, one-bedroom apartments, doing the smart buys in the right places where you're going to get the best returns and the most trouble-free management that you can get. So that's a really important point of what we do there.
So oftentimes an investor in the pied-à-terre in Marylebone or in near Piccadilly, in that area, these will probably be rentals, right?
Yeah, they're a mixture actually. I mean, if you look at owner occupiers, we do a fair bit of that. Often they're Brits or expats coming back, it's that type of thing. Often we find Americans coming on assignment for a couple of years, particularly because London as a financial center, despite Brexit, is still very dominant. And often those people buy. They choose not to rent because one of the reasons is that renting in London has become phenomenally expensive, Ed. I mean, within the last 12 months, rents have gone up 20%, 20% for all sorts of reasons. So, for a lot of reasons, people are choosing to buy. Interest rates, although they're record highs at the moment over the last decade or two, so in the UK, the base rate's at about 5%. It's still, if you're not a first-time buyer sort of thing, which very few of our clients are first-time buyers, to be honest with you, it's quite manageable. So it
So,
actually
yeah,
makes better sense.
yeah. Okay, so these people are paying cash.
So it's a mixture. It's a mixture. There's quite a substantial element of cash often goes into purchases. But we work closely with banks, international banks, private banks, who are often in the news at the moment, probably for the wrong reasons, some of them, which is unfortunate, because actually the banking sector, private banking sector, is a very high quality sector. And these guys, the private banks, tend to be quite international in what they do. So what they lend, but they just don't lend at the very high loan to value ratio. So a private bank, for example, lending to a substantial private client, okay, we'll probably gear up to like 60, maybe 50 to 65%, probably nearer to 50 in the current climate. So yeah, there's quite a lot of cash, but it's not necessarily 100%.
Let me ask you about the history of Curzon. It's been around a long time, right?
Yeah, well, I like to think it's been around a while. Yeah, I mean, not as long as, we don't go back to the 17th century, but yeah, we've been around for about 25, 30 years. Yeah.
So you currently have people based there.
Oh yeah, yeah, we have a great team in London. We have my co-director is acquisitions property management expert, and in fact, the guy's called David Redshaw. He's a great, absolutely fantastic bloke, and he and I set up the original Curzon, which was called something else back in, would you believe, 1996.
Oh,
And then we sort of, went our separate ways a little bit, and we've come full circle and we're back in partnership again. We both have, I like to think, outstanding careers in acquisition and also in development, refurbishment, and property management, including blocks. So it's not just individual units. Often clients have more than one property, not so surprisingly. So we manage portfolios for people as well.
okay. So let me ask you, this ties in perfectly then, doesn't it, with your contacts and activity in the Bahamas and in Dubai?
Yeah, there's some interesting crossover there. Taking the Bahamas, I mean, the Bahamas is actually an international proposition. It feeds into our London markets. It feeds into our international markets. From London, I mean, we also operate in other sort of tax neutral jurisdictions. So places like Switzerland, for example, with Cayman Islands, places like that. And there's a lot of international traffic goes through London, and it's all highly managed, and it's all working with top sort of law firms and people like that. Yeah, and the Middle East, it flows through there, and of course London flows beautifully into New York, and New York flows beautifully into London. So there are all these sort of cross streams. And one sort of goes with the flow on it. But yeah, it dovetails well into everything that we do. Yes.
Well, it's really interesting. I'm looking forward personally to returning to London in mid-September. As you know, because you participated in our first live meeting since February 27, 2020.
Yeah.
Because of
Yeah.
COVID, that meeting was on Embassy Row in Washington, and it was the last meeting since May 9 of this year in London. And I was really blessed to have the support from the Global Trading Bank, HSBC, where
Yeah.
they hosted us in their headquarters in Canary Wharf. And our top sponsor was AGS Worldwide. And your involvement, it was quite international. And so HSBC has invited me to return and do it again, which I'm, of course, honored. So the date will be September 21, and I do hope that you and your London people can be involved either virtually or in person.
Yeah, we'd love to. I mean, both. We could end up doing both, certainly with David in London. I will try and be in London then.
Yes,
Um,
I know you're going to be in the Mideast in Dubai.
Yes, but these are often road trips, to be honest with you. So sort of
Mm,
go out to Dubai for a few days, come back through London for a week or two, or however it pans out. I mean, the other nice thing is the clients move around quite a bit, so you're never
yeah,
quite sure. Well, you're never quite sure, or you never quite know where you're gonna meet them. So yeah, but
yeah.
I'm there in full support for you. I think it's fantastic.
No, that's really good. Well, we want to be sure we're talking about the right topics. And the idea of internationals investing so much time and effort and money into London is is really a good thing. It's not only is it really cool, but so what comes to mind is this TV show series with Stanley Tucci. It talks about food and culture as it relates to. And he recently bought a home in London, and his wife is British, and I'm not sure where it is. He didn't broadcast that, but he talks about the Italian renaissance in London and the food uh, renaissance in London and how diverse and fabulous it is. And it's all because of this reinvestment by the world into London, notwithstanding the mess caused by Brexit. Someday, this is not a political show, although certainly because global business and everything is geopolitics. So, uh, why not just end Brexit, or make a deal of some kind so
Yeah, well,
there's rejoining the world?
yeah, well, quite right too. And picking up on your Italian thing, I'm a massive fan of Italy and Italians. In fact, my first relocation company was the guys who bought it were a couple of delightful Italians out of Rome, an
Yeah.
old publishing family who wanted to get into relocation, and they were terrific to work with. We worked for their Italian lawyers in London who were fantastic. Everyone's charming, cultivated, civilized. The food is fantastic. The music is wonderful. The culture is rich. And there is undoubtedly a charm with the Italians and the Italian style and the climate. Anyway, so yeah, I'm sort of supporting you, waxing lyrical on all of that. And some brilliant Italian restaurants in London. I mean, there always have been, and it's fantastic. It's great. Yeah.
Okay. So now London is a big area. It's a geographically large area, right?
Yes, London is geographically really big, actually. It's really spread out. We tend to focus very much in what's called prime central London, which is really a British sort of real estate term that's kind of become quite colloquial now. And it is, yeah, it tends to be sort of Kensington, Chelsea, all the places we discussed. But it also, interestingly, includes a lot of places that maybe people wouldn't necessarily associate with that. So places like Stockwell, London Docklands is a great example. Of a lot of new build out there over the years. I mean, actually, people now moving back into the centre because the banks are pulling out of Canary Wharf. But it's much broader pitch than you think. And the other interesting thing is the Elizabeth line, which used to be known as a Crossrail extension, has completely changed the travel dynamics in London.
Well, how is that? Is that from some Heathrow right into um, the bank, or do you have to
Yeah,
stop first at somewhere else and change, or what?
and further, I mean, if you're looking at West London, it goes out to Reading, which is sort of home counties and a bit beyond. And East London, I can't remember, but it goes all the way out east. And to give you an idea, and I might not well be entirely accurate on this, but just to give you a feel for it. So the travel times from somewhere, a place like Ealing, and you're probably wondering where Ealing is, it's sort of like a suburb to the west of London. It's not right out there, but it's not right in there type of thing. But it's a really, really good area. And it used to be the train travel times into like Bond Street, which is prime West End London, used to be like 35, 40 minutes, something like that. It's down to like 12.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and to go from Ealing to Ealing to Liverpool Street is like, under 17 minutes or something. I mean, it's completely changed the conversation. And it's also, you've got two things going on. You've got very uh, expensive London real estate. I mean, although growth is very flat at the moment, I mean, prices have not gone up for a while. They're pretty flat. They're probably edging down a bit at the moment. Um, but you've got all of this real estate beyond prime central London, which is now accessible, but in London. Okay. And that is very, very helpful in the world of relocation, for example, with corporate assignees and so on, because you get much more for your money outside of, prime. So you don't, have to live in Knightsbridge, for example. Very, very few people can afford to live in Knightsbridge, but you can live very comfortably, within 20 minutes of Knightsbridge now.
Why are the banks thinking about, well, I know HSBC is going to downsize and go somewhere else, but why are they doing that?
Well, you're into macroeconomics now is really the short answer. You've got very, high inflation. You've got the UK inflation at the moment is it's just under 8%. It's like 8.8% last month. It's come down to 7.9%. So the cost of living is really, really high. Um, so expense is one thing. Hybrid working has completely changed the way people work, and these big banks and other big office occupiers work. I mean, the vacancy rate for offices in London is at an all-time record high, just as they are in New York. I can't give you the exact number, but 16 to 20% is not far off the mark. And people don't want to go back to work. They want to work on a hybrid basis. And there's been some great data out recently indicating that if people were told to go back to work, they don't want to go back to work. Up to 25% of those employees will start looking for another job. So you've got all these, really very different dynamics. It's a bit like the pandemic. No one really saw it coming, and then everyone has to deal with it. And we sort of have one of those, it is a seismic change in the business landscape, in the operating landscape.
So what part of town, I assume they're going to go downtown, downtown in the financial district, by the Shard or right, or by Lloyd's, that downtown. HSBC will move into that area? Or are they going to? I mean, it's a huge, rich organization. They can go anywhere, but where will they go?
Yeah, I mean, the banks, and not just the banks, but all the associate businesses that tend to go to the banks. So if you go down to Canary Wharf, you'll find all the big law firms down there, all the big consultancy firms. I mean, there's all this spin-off. They all, they all sort of congregate together.
Yeah.
And they're moving back to the city, the traditional city of London. And they're probably also moving into other locations, midtown locations, and so on. But there is this definite sort of pull-out situation going on in Canary Wharf at the moment. And Canary Wharf is great, but London, London, the city of London, and so on, it's so well connected now. People sort of do prefer to live in the more traditional locations if they can afford to do so. So yeah, so that's sort of what's going on. It is a real change in the landscape, which we haven't seen before.
Well, that'll shake things up because, as I said, our meeting was at HSBC on the wharf, and I had never been there before.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
so I was impressed. It looked like Wall Street, Midtown
yeah,
Manhattan,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
and all the banks were right there, just like in New York.
Yeah, and they're not all moving. I mean, and they're not moving everything lock, stock, and barrel. So there's still going to still be plenty of life and business going on, but it's going to impact the rents.
Right.
A lot of these properties are owned by institutions, and the rents, there aren't going to be the tenants. The rents are going to come down. A lot of these are institutionally funded, and we're waiting for really an office crash is the short and long and the short of it. And I think that's probably going to come in the next 12 to 24 months, maybe a bit longer. And there is going to be a really bad time for offices. And luckily, the British government are looking at the whole planning regime. But I have to say, the British government and the local governments are really great at making a mess of this. So we'll have to see what happens.
Well, let's talk about something else. Let's talk about Mayfair. I noticed in what I was prepping with earlier that One Mayfair is looks like a fabulous area. I remember being in Mayfair years ago when we did our first meetings. High-end, beautiful, traditional area, and you're going to be involved in something, or you are right now, right?
Very loosely, I would say. One Mayfair is one of a number of very exciting schemes going on all around that part of London. It's just behind the Dorchester. It's spitting distance away from Grosvenor Square, which has been transformed into high-end luxury residential properties. So the American Embassy, iconic American Embassy building, has been completely redeveloped by an Indian property group. So yeah, I mean, we're sort of in touch with some of these developers. I wouldn't want to be presumptuous and say we're acting for anyone in particular, but we're very well connected, Ed. And we have a lot of contacts in those areas, and we try to help them out if they want help, and one keeps the dialogue going. So it's one of a number of schemes that we're connected to.
Okay, so the word scheme in America uh, has a not a negative, but a curious connotation. But in London, a scheme means a plan, a working plan, right?
Yeah. Two great nations separated by a common language. Uh, George Bernard Shaw, I think. Yeah. I mean, yeah. There's this. I constantly run into this because I'm up between London and New York quite a bit these days. And yeah, the language catches me out as well. But yeah, a scheme is like a development, a project, that type of thing. It's a very positive connotation. In the States, I'm not so sure. I think you're right. There's a negative, like, someone scheming a way to try and, I don't know. Yeah. So it's yeah, the joys of American British linguistics. Yeah, always a challenge.
So I remember in the early 90s, no, not in the early O's, the aughts, right? Like 2000, 2001 or something.
Yeah.
Um, so we produced a meeting at the Landmark, which is on the north side near Marylebone area.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Very
and
nice.
the
Yeah.
Landmark was a beautiful place. What is
Beautiful.
that neighborhood called?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. Marylebone is sort of where it generically would fall into. But it's one of those areas, it borders on Mayfair, okay, but it's sort of north of Oxford Street, so south of Oxford Street, and it is a sort of square where traditional Mayfair is. There's a W1 postcode, okay. So it's slightly ambiguous. I would, depending where it, yeah, I would probably call it Marylebone-esque, just on the borders type of thing. I mean, it's like some of the it's like some of the names in New York again. The sort of the areas slightly merge into each other, And is it north of Houston, or sometimes you get very definitive linear like that, like
Yeah.
it's this Houston street, so yeah, it's okay. In London, it doesn't quite work like that. You get this sort of hazy gray bits. But yeah, I mean, I was looking at a company the other day, met a company the other day, and their offices were definitely not Mayfair. They were sort of north, but quite far up of Oxford Street, which is a little bit of a sort of no man landish, but it's not really Marylebone. And they were describing themselves as Mayfair on the basis of a W1 postcode. I think, okay, fair enough. I mean, it's not pure Mayfair, but for a local, they would sort of okay, well, it's a little bit cute, but all right.
Yeah. So it's not
uh,
the prime.
yeah, but it's
Yeah.
okay,
Right.
it's
Right.
okay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is really interesting. So what about like Pancras, where the Eurostar is launched from? What's
Yeah,
that? That's on the north side, right? Near King's Road?
yes, that's exactly right. I mean, it's actually called King's Cross, the area,
Yeah,
which
King's Cross.
makes it really easier to deal with that. So you got King's Cross and St Pancras Station there. And then a bit further along, sort of going up the Euston Road west, you then come to Euston and then Marylebone and so on. But that area has changed colossally. I mean, it's a really dynamic area. It used to be one of those wonderful old World War II bomb sites, Ed. And a lot of London regeneration is due to the Luftwaffe
Yeah.
bombing accuracy, or otherwise as it may have been. And it was one of the, up there, the whole King's Cross development was one of the great last development sites in prime central London. So yeah, it's called King's Cross, and that's sort of what's known as and what it will stay as. But it's a whole regeneration area going to the city of London, and there's a sort of, again, it's one of those slightly grey areas there. And there's some great housing. I mean, absolutely fantastic. Lots of new build, lots of what they would call condo buildings over here, what we call modern apartment blocks in London.
Yeah, and it's all centered around where the train stops are.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as communication hubs, I mean, King's Cross and St Pancras, they're side by side. Are amazing hubs. They're the equivalent of your sort of Penn Station or your Grand Central here in New York, or your Gare du Nord in Paris, or those sorts of really huge sort of hubs. Milan, the railway station in Milan is another great example. But yeah, everything flows between the communications, the hubs. Again, the Elizabeth line has made a phenomenal impact in London, just getting across London on the tube. I did it last time I was over. I decided to really go and test it firsthand. And it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
How much was that from Heathrow into the bank?
Well, okay, now you're putting me on my metal here a little bit. But you can get, okay, you can get the Elizabeth line, well, the Elizabeth line, from Heathrow, I think. I'm 99% sure it's directly from Heathrow. And it goes directly into Paddington. Okay,
Paddington.
so parallel running, that's the Heathrow Express, which is, I wouldn't call it obsolete, but it's certainly, you have two to choose from now. But the Elizabeth line, I think, is better, because from there it then takes you right across town and into the city on like 2 or 3 stops. It's something like that. It's a handful, not even a handful of stops. It's incredibly fast,
So
and it
if I
connects with
wanted
all
to
the other
go
cities.
direct, I don't have to go to Paddington. I could take the Elizabeth right into, say, Bank.
Yeah, pretty well. You might have to do a change somewhere along the way, but yeah, it is much faster is the point, and much more direct. If I had a bit more time, I'd whip out my tube map now and I give you the precise stuff. But yeah,
So,
it's really
so
good.
would it be £10 for that trip, or £20, or
Oh, golly, I don't know. I mean,
I'll look it
the
up.
yeah, the Heathrow Express is expensive. It's cheaper. it's cheaper because you're onto the tube system and tube tickets. Um, so yeah, I mean, I can't remember. I use a tube travel card, which is automatically topped up. Which the London again, the UK is really good on this stuff. So it it sort of gets mixed up with your tube rides and so on, but it's not bad. I mean, it's pretty good. It's incredibly good value.
Okay, well, this is all about transportation. Okay, and transportation hubs drive real estate values.
Yeah, they've always been huge drivers of real estate. And one of the I'll tell you an interesting little anecdote here. I was down at Battersea Power Station last trip over, and Battersea Power Station, you've got to go and see it. It's absolutely phenomenal. So it's this
I've
iconic.
heard of it, but I don't know where it is.
Well, the point is that it's just south of the river, okay, and it has its own tube line, okay, its own tube station. So they've built that as extension to the Northern Line. So it's it's minutes from central London. It's absolutely easy to get to. And what happened, and this is again exactly what happened with Canary Wharf, when they put in a tube line extension, is sort of overnight the property values took off. And it always amuses me because it actually takes quite a while to build a tube line, even a
Hmm.
small one. Okay. I mean, it takes years, right? And I'm not talking like 2 or 3, I'm talking like, 5 to 10 and often more. And so all the property guys are sort of going, great, let's buy up the land now before, whilst they're sort of putting the shovel in to get the first lump of soil out. And and that's of course how values go up. And then on the day that these tube stations open, values often, jump like 10, 15, 20%. It's crazy. People go, oh, I didn't know there was a tube station there. And they probably haven't been sleeping at night for the last 5 years due to the construction. So
All the noise, yeah.
there you
Oh,
go.
that's really interesting. So Cannery Wharf is near Battersea then, isn't it?
Well, it's on the river.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a connection there for sure. And yeah, I mean the tube line out to London Docklands, it's fantastic. It's the Jubilee line.
Mhm.
And that connects from I can't remember where south of the river exactly. I think you have to go up and then out a bit. Although you've got Waterloo, and the Jubilee line goes into Waterloo, and then from out there it's like 2 or 3 stops into
Right,
the heart of
right,
Canada. It's really fast. I mean, it's like
right.
sort of under 10 minutes. It's fantastic.
One time when Joanne and I were in London, we stayed, our accommodation was like an Airbnb, but it wasn't called that. It was something else. And it was right near the Waterloo station.
Yeah,
It was just down one of those side streets. And
yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah, and I had never stayed there before, but I liked it.
Oh,
It
it's
was
brilliant. It's a brilliant area. So much has gone on around Waterloo over the last few decades. The development of the area has been fantastic. It's been very positive. Okay, you have a lot of creators, architects down there, and so on. You've got some brilliant restaurants all around there. You've got some great theaters. It's been terrific. And a little further up from there, and again, I've got to get my geography right. You've got sort of the Tate Modern, which is another converted power station, which is brilliant. I mean, absolutely fabulous. The
now that's a
two,
museum, is that right?
yeah, it's an art gallery, and it's
Hmm.
it's very contemporary, and it's very much like Battersea Power Station. I mean, it's a forerunner of that. These are, the turbine halls of these places. You could park an aircraft carrier in them. I mean, they're massive, and they're hugely impressive. Um, so yeah, Waterloo, that area, Southwark, all around there. You've got the Globe Theatre not far away from there. It's really fantastic. It's a great area, great
Okay,
art.
now I've got a question about Greenwich. Okay, where is Greenwich, and what's the big deal with Greenwich time?
Well, Greenwich is east. Okay, it's this side of Canary Wharf, if you like. Okay, it's south of the river. Now, Greenwich, the observatory there. Now, again, I love history, but I'm not going to be particularly good on the dates here. But in the good old days of colonialism, if there were ever such a thing, but when the British were ruling the seas, controlling the seas, and ruled Britannia, wherever, all that sort of stuff, and a bit before, they had a point of measurement. And I guess we beat the French to it because the French are very good at these things. We're at war with them most of the time during those centuries. So the medium of Greenwich, that was the mark. And it's an amazing place to visit, by the way. It's absolutely
No, but
incredible.
why use that and not just London time?
Well, even in London, you've got to have a mark somewhere. I think a lot of distances in London are measured from Trafalgar Square, for example. But in terms of sort of globalization or colonialization or empires or whatever, and the Britain was a naval superpower then. I guess the Navy won the day, and the Naval College is at Greenwich. And I'm just speculating. I mean, I'm sure I'm sure a historian will hop on and contact you at some point to
I'm
correct
just
all these mistakes.
an American media guy on the other side of the pond and all across the U.S., as far away as you can get on the Mexican border, and the ocean is right over there.
Yeah,
And,
yeah,
yeah,
that's great.
so I'm asking you because you're a native.
Yeah, well, it's great. I mean, there's so many fascinating places in London, and there's so much history. It's so rich in history, and
Yeah,
it's
isn't
great.
that interesting? So there must be laws that you cannot change the exterior of these old buildings. You want to keep it looking the same way, but you go inside and it's completely modern.
Yeah, that's right. There's a very well-established planning system for heritage buildings. Okay, and it's called as a grading system. And you have three categories and a surveyor. So I sort of, this is really my sweet spot. What the Brits would call a bit of an anorak. So you basically have grade one. Okay, I'll give you a quick summary. So grade one is where the whole building inside and outside is protected. Okay, so if you want to change the color of the paint over the fireplace, you have to go and get consent from the local planning authority. It's one of the very tricky to work with. Grade two is where the envelope of the building is protected. Okay, so for example, if you're behind me, we have the House of Commons Parliament. As far as I'm aware, and I've got to be careful, I think it's grade two listed, but it might be grade two star. And you say, oh, golly, what's that? Well, grade two star simply means that certain elements within the inside of the building are also listed. So take like a fireplace or something like that, something which is really considered exceptional, although the rest of the building may be internally maybe pretty ordinary. So yeah, so that in a nutshell, there's many more things around that, but that's the gist of them.
Well, that's really interesting history. Okay, finally, let's talk about you. And how do you tie all this into New York?
Well, I've been really fortunate, to be honest with you, that I have this this personal sort of American British background. My fundamentals are probably British, and my professional qualifications have been really, really British until I hit the States about 6, 7 years ago when I did all the American ones as well. So I have all the American agency qualifications and so on. But what's good is I've worked um, between the UK and the US for many, many years in property relocation, which we still do a fair bit of, but we've moved into the tech center with a sector with another business called Absolute Relay. which sort of Curzon pars that in terms of property support.
So
But
absoluteglo.com is an app, right?
that's right. It's an app, but it's sort of also becoming more of a fully fledged relocation company is the way it's shaping up at the moment. And it's separate from what Curzon does, but Curzon does a lot of these sourcing and support for that, for example. And Curzon also does a little bit of VIP relocation in London and New York. But the point is that there's often been a lot of American crossover. We have a lot of American friends and colleagues and associates, and I live in New York, and it's fantastic. And it also, it's not just me, but it does put us in a fairly unique space when we're working with both, local clients, British American clients, and international clients, because we cross over, we understand the nuances. We also understand the laws, which is really important because there's a lot of legal differentiation. And you have to tread carefully in both cities, and you need to know your way around. So we sort of bring, or I say we, myself and my colleagues bring that insight. It is led by me. Yeah, so it's great. It's great. It's challenging sometimes, but it's really good. I think our clients really appreciate it.
Okay, so now's the time to announce your website.
Well, our Curzon website is www.curzoncentral.com. And what we have there is we have the UK and the American website together. So for the New York side, it's curzoncentral.com/US. Okay. And that covers the US. We thought it was easier to actually put everything into one website rather than have two separate websites. So
So
that's
James, finally here, and I really thank you for this tour around London, underground, overground, through the streets.
yeah.
And thank you for being a member of Global Press Club. So when you're a member, you use this vehicle and others to get your message out. And we're on a membership drive now, and I thank you for being just a perfect example for how it can work.
Well, thank you, Ed. I mean, whilst we're sort of mutual admiration society here,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm a big fan, and it's been great, and it is great. And I would recommend you to anyone who wants to really communicate and get under the skin a bit. I think that's the really important part, and it makes more interesting for the audience and everyone. So great. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a fan.
Getting the camera ready is one thing, but then using it effectively is what we teach to members every month. And the more experience the member has through the TV shows and radio and explaining what they do and how their brand helps people succeed, achieve something, that's the story. And I thank you very much for being here. We are live on YouTube, and for the next months and years to come on GlobalTVtalkshow.com. Thank you, James. Take care.
Thank you. Cheers.
All right, I'm signing off from San Diego, and thank you. Bye.